The morning my brother-in-law finally left, I was standing at the kitchen window watching the birds at the feeder I'd hung from the old oak tree. A pair of cardinals. The male, bright red, kept chasing the female away. I remember thinking, yes, I know exactly how she feels. My name is Margaret. I am 64 years old. I own a pale yellow house on Clearwater Lane in Columbus, Ohio, with a garden I have been tending for 31 years. My late husband, Gerald, planted the first rose bush the spring after we moved in. He passed 7 years ago, quietly, the way he did most things. And for 2 years after that, I was genuinely at peace. Lonely, sometimes, but peaceful. Then my brother-in-law Dennis called. I should tell you about Dennis. Gerald had 2 brothers. The older one, Paul, lives in Phoenix and sends a Christmas card every year without fail. Dennis was the younger one, the charming one, the one who could talk you into or out of almost anything with that wide smile of his and those big warm hands that were always reaching for something that wasn't his. He called on a Tuesday, said he was going through a rough patch. His second marriage had just ended. And I want to be careful how I say this because I did feel genuine sympathy at the time, and he needed somewhere to land for a little while, a few weeks, maybe a month, just until he sorted himself out. "You've got that spare room, Maggie," he said. He always called me Maggie. Gerald used to say only people who wanted something from me called me Maggie. I should have remembered that. I said yes because I had loved Gerald, and Dennis was the last living piece of him I still saw at holidays. I said yes because I was 61 and still believed that family meant something unconditional. I said yes because I thought a few weeks was a few weeks. Dennis arrived on a Saturday in early October with 2 duffel bags, a guitar he never played, and a box of kitchen things that he installed in my cabinets without asking. He put his cast iron skillet right on top of my good ceramic baking dish. I moved it without saying a word. The first 2 weeks were fine. He helped with yard work, ate dinner with me, told stories about Gerald when they were boys that made me laugh until my eyes watered. I thought, well, maybe this is good for both of us. By week 4, he had stopped helping with yard work. By week 8, he had stopped eating dinner with me unless I cooked something he specifically liked. By month 3, Dennis had a routine. He woke up late, sat in Gerald's armchair in the living room, the green one by the window that I had never let anyone sit in, not even myself, not really. And he watched television or talked on his phone in a low voice like he was conducting business. I would come downstairs in the morning and find his coffee cup on my grandmother's side table without a coaster, and I would stand there in my robe holding my own mug and breathe very carefully. I did not say anything. I told myself, he is grieving too, in his way. He lost his marriage. He is Gerald's brother. Be patient. I was patient for 11 more months. In that time, Dennis brought home a friend twice without telling me ahead of time. He left a bag of garbage on the back porch for 6 days because he said his back was bothering him and the trash cans were too far. He used my AAA card to get his car towed. He started receiving packages at my address. One of them was clearly heavy equipment. I cannot tell you what kind. I only know the UPS driver looked at me with an expression that suggested he had delivered it before, to this address, which was the first I was hearing of it. When I asked Dennis about the packages, he said it was nothing, just some tools for a side project he was working on. He said it with that smile, the wide one. I had been doing something during those months, though, something quiet. I had started meeting with a financial advisor. Her name was Karen, and she had short gray hair and reading glasses on a beaded chain, and she did not mince words. In our first meeting, I showed her a summary of my accounts and told her about my situation. She set down her glasses and looked at me over them. "How long has he been living with you?" she asked. "About 14 months, I said. She nodded slowly. "And his name is on nothing. No accounts, no utilities, no lease." "Correct." "Okay," she folded her hands. "Then you are in a better position than most women who sit in that chair. But we have some work to do." We did the work. I want to explain what that actually means because I think it matters. I want you to understand this the way I understand it now, standing on the other side. First, Karen and I did a full review of every account, every automatic payment, every place where Dennis's presence in my house had even the smallest thread into my financial life. It turned out there were more threads than I expected. He had borrowed Gerald's old credit card information, a card I had kept in a drawer and never canceled, and used it twice. Small amounts. The kind you might miss on a statement if you were not looking carefully. I had not been looking carefully. I had not been looking carefully. I canceled the card. I did not tell Dennis. I called my insurance agent and had a quiet conversation about what it meant legally that someone had been living in my home for over a year without a formal agreement. She connected me with an estate attorney named Robert, who had a firm handshake and an office full of law books that looked genuinely read. He walked me through exactly what I needed to do, step by step, so that nothing I did could be challenged later. I updated my will. I established a small trust for the house. I had a document prepared, proper, legal, witnessed, that established clearly that Dennis was a guest in my home, not a tenant, and that no financial arrangement had ever existed between us. Then I did the thing Karen had suggested quietly at our third meeting, the one that felt dramatic when she said it but felt like breathing. Once I actually did it. I put the house on the market, not to sell it to a stranger. I had spoken to my daughter Renee, who lives in Cincinnati with her husband and my 2 grandchildren. Renee had been telling me for a year and a half to handle the Dennis situation, which was her diplomatic way of saying what everyone who loves me was thinking. When I told her my plan, she was quiet for a long moment. "Mom," she said, "you are the most strategic person I have ever met." I did not tell Dennis the house was listed. The listing was quiet, not widely publicized, handled through Robert's connections. The buyer was Renee. The sale price was fair, documented, legitimate in every way Robert could make it. After the sale, I would lease the house back from Renee at a modest rate, and Renee would have an asset. It was tidy, it was clean, and it meant that my home was no longer the kind of asset that Dennis or anyone could point to as a reason to stay. Because here is what I had learned in those months of quiet research. Dennis was not just waiting out a rough patch. He had, I discovered, lost his job 14 months before he called me. Not recently. 14 months before. He had spent that time staying with a friend, then another friend, working his way through his list. I was, as best as I could piece it together, the last name on that list. I found this out through a phone call with Paul in Phoenix. Paul, the Christmas card brother. Paul, who had also received a call from Dennis 2 years prior and had said no firmly because, and I am quoting Paul here, "I knew what he was doing." "Why didn't you warn me?" I asked. A pause. "Maggie," he said, "I didn't think he'd actually go through with it. And then when I heard he was there, I thought maybe you knew. I thought maybe you'd set a timeline." I had not set a timeline. I set one now. Robert prepared a formal notice, not angry, not emotional. A clean, legal document that established a move-out date 60 days from the date of delivery. It cited the absence of any tenancy agreement, the recent change in property ownership, and the fact that no financial arrangement had existed. Robert said it was airtight. He said it twice, which I appreciated. I did not hand it to Dennis myself. Robert had a courier deliver it on a Wednesday morning while I was at the garden center buying tulip bulbs for the fall planting. I wanted to be busy with something alive when it arrived. I came home to find Dennis sitting at the kitchen table with the document open in front of him. He looked up when I came through the door and I could see him doing the calculation behind his eyes. The smile was not quite working. "Maggie," he said. "Margaret," I said. I set my bag of bulbs on the counter. "Would you like some coffee?" He stared at me. "You sold the house." "Renee bought the house," I said. "I still live here. I just don't own it anymore." He stopped, started again. "You did this on purpose." "I did a lot of things on purpose." I said. I filled the kettle. "Coffee?" He did not want coffee. He spent 2 days very quiet, moving around the house carefully, like he was recalculating something. I went about my life. I planted 16 tulip bulbs along the front walk. I had dinner with my friend Carol on Thursday. I slept well, which surprised me. On the third day, Dennis knocked on my bedroom door in the evening. He asked if we could talk. I said of course, and we sat in the living room. Him on the couch, me in the chair by the window, Gerald's chair, the green one. The first time I had sat in it, it was more comfortable than I expected. Dennis said he thought the 60 days was unreasonable. He said he had nowhere to go. He said that Gerald would not have wanted this. He said that word, Gerald, and paused, I think waiting for the effect of it. I thought of Gerald. I thought of him genuinely. I thought of how Gerald used to say, Dennis means well, but meaning well is the beginning, not the end. I thought of the rose bush in the backyard that I had kept alive through 7 winters without Gerald's help. Dennis, I said, you have 60 days, and I am happy to help you make a list of resources. There are transitional housing programs. I don't need a program, he said. The smile was fully gone now. Then you have 60 days to find an alternative, I said. He left in 43. I know because I counted, not obsessively. I was not standing at the window with a calendar, but I noticed. The morning he carried the second duffel bag to his car, the same 2 duffel bags he had arrived with 2 years before, plus the box of kitchen things and the guitar he never played. I was at the kitchen window again. The cardinals were at the feeder. The female, this time, was eating alone. He stopped at his car door and looked back at the house. I do not know if he could see me through the glass. He stood there for a moment, and I wondered what he saw. A woman who had let him down, probably. A woman who had been cold and calculating. A woman who had been cold and calculating. A woman who had not honored family. What I saw, looking out at him, was a man who had counted on my grief to make me careless. A man who had walked through a door I had left open out of love for someone else and had never once thought to bring flowers. I watched him drive away. I did not cry. I did not feel triumphant, exactly. I felt the way you feel when a long headache finally lifts. Not happiness so much as the memory of what normal feels like. I made a fresh pot of coffee. I called Renee and told her he was gone. She said, good. And then she said, Mom, I want you to know you did nothing wrong. He did. I held on to that for a while. Then I went out to the backyard and stood in the garden. The roses were finished for the season, cut back, just stubs in the ground. But I know what is under there. I know what comes back. I had one more thing to do. I had been thinking about it for weeks, planning the exact moment. I went to the living room. I stood in front of Gerald's green armchair by the window. I ran my hand along the arm of it the way I used to when I walked by and he was sitting in it, and I stood there for a moment with my hand on the fabric. Then I moved the chair. Not far, just 6 inches to the left, closer to the window where the afternoon light comes in best, where you can see the oak tree and the cardinal feeder and, if the angle is right, the very tip of the rose bed. I sat down in it. The light was perfect. My daughter called back an hour later to check on me, which is what Renee does. I told her I was fine. I told her I was sitting in the good chair. She laughed and I laughed, and it was the kind of laughter that doesn't need to explain itself. I want to say something to anyone listening who is in the middle of what I was in the middle of. Not the end of it, the middle, where everything feels stuck and you cannot quite see the shape of the exit. The exit has a shape. You just have to walk toward it slowly enough that no one notices until you are already through. My mother used to say that a woman who stops arguing has not given up. She has made a decision. I did not understand what she meant when she said it. I understand it now, sitting in this chair watching the light move across my garden in my house with my coffee on my own quiet Tuesday morning. Dennis has a studio apartment now, according to Paul. He's apparently doing fine. I wish him well. I mean that without any performance in it. I genuinely wish him a life where he finds his footing. I just no longer wish to be the floor he stands on. The cardinals are back at the feeder, both of them this time, the male and the female, eating side by side. She is not being chased today. Maybe he learned. Maybe she just stopped moving out of the way. I cannot say which, but I will tell you, she looks perfectly settled, and so do I. There's something I have learned about the way consequences work, not as punishment, not as reward, but as a kind of quiet arithmetic. What you put into a relationship, a home, a life, accumulates. And what you take without giving accumulates too, just differently. Dennis spent 2 years making withdrawals of space, of comfort, of trust, of my late husband's good name, without ever making a single deposit. He did not do this out of cruelty, I think. He did it out of habit. He had learned somewhere along the way that warmth could be borrowed indefinitely if you smiled wide enough and invoked the right memories. What he had not counted on was that I had been paying attention the whole time. That is the part I want to sit with for a moment. Not the legal steps, not the documents, not the financial advisor or the estate attorney. Though all of those things mattered enormously and I would do every one of them again. I want to talk about the decision that came before any of that. The decision to stop explaining myself to myself, to stop saying he means well when the evidence said otherwise, to stop confusing loyalty to Gerald with obligation to someone who happened to share Gerald's last name. Wisdom is not something you arrive at all at once. I did not wake up one morning suddenly clear-eyed. It happened in small moments. A coffee cup without a coaster. A package I didn't recognize. A phone call with Paul that rearranged everything I thought I understood about the situation. Wisdom, I think, is mostly just paying attention long enough to see the pattern, and then having the courage not to look away once you've seen it. That courage is what I'm most proud of. Not the strategy, not the outcome, the courage. Because there were mornings during those months when I stood at the kitchen window and thought about how much easier it would be to simply keep the peace. To keep being Maggie. To let the chair stay where it was and the cup stay without its coaster and tell myself it didn't matter. Plenty of people make that choice. I understand it completely. It takes its own kind of strength to absorb and endure. But I had absorbed and endured for 2 years. And I had learned that absorbing without acting is not patience, it is slow erasure. So I acted, quietly, legally, methodically, without anger and without drama. I built an exit before I needed it. And when Dennis drove away on that Tuesday morning, he left believing he was the one who had decided something. That is fine. Let him have that. What I kept was the house, the garden, the chair by the window, and the particular peace that only comes when you have done the hard thing the right way. I think about the women who might be in the middle of something similar right now. Maybe it is not a brother-in-law. Maybe it is someone else entirely. But the feeling, that low-grade sense of being slowly crowded out of your own life, I think that feeling is recognizable across a lot of different circumstances. And if you are in it, I want you to know this. The exit has a shape. You cannot always see it from where you are standing, but it is there, and you are allowed to walk toward it. The cardinals are still coming to the feeder. The roses will come back in the spring, and I am sitting in the good chair, in the good light, with my coffee getting warm in my hands. That is enough. That is everything.